Hello, everybody. This is the Cisco Day Roundtable. We're going to be talking about Benjamin Lafayette Sisko and Mr. Avery Brooks with Siroc Lofton.
Hello.
There he is, everybody. We're also joined by Melissa Longo here, matching my background.
Yeah.
Well, her background is. Mr. J.R. Poole is also here. What's up, J.R.? We've got Chuck A, who's got a cool Ferengi Eyes sweater on, if I'm seeing my... Yep, there it is. Goldu Scott Jensen, the evil one, Goldu Scott. Sailor Marge is here. She does the best muted laugh. Eve England is also here, all the way out in Wales. We've got Estelle here. She's going to drop some knowledge on us and teach us a lot of cool things about Cisco. We've got Wyeth also here, who's like, hey, I want to teach things about Cisco too. You will. And lastly, Pat is here with his cool Jake Sisko, who wore it better background. So we're here for the man of the hour, Mr. Avery Brooks, a very, very accomplished human being. And we all fell in love with him as Captain Sisko, Benjamin Lafayette Sisko. But the man behind the character is who we really love. And let's talk about it for a little while, if we could, shall we? Melissa Longo, we're going to be sharing our favorite Cisco moments. Melissa, do you have a favorite Cisco moment?
This is a tough question because there are many favorite Cisco moments, and you would think an obvious one would be when Cisco says, "But you can't erase an idea." In Far Beyond the Outside Stars, but that's probably not my favorite moment. My favorite moment, I think, would be in The Visitor when old Jake Sisko is sleeping, and Sisko is just staring at his son after coming out of limbo. And that moment is just so beautiful, and the look on Sisko's face and the pride that he has for his son. Yes.
This one.
It's so beautiful. That's probably one of my favorite moments of Captain Sisko. It just captures his soul.
And also, I just want to say very tiny little shout out to Tony Todd for for playing an adult Jake Sisko in that episode. Yeah. Just, anyway, sorry.
Melissa, did you have a second favorite too? Because you also mentioned some really cool times between Sisko and Nog that Aaron really loved.
Yes.
Mr. Aaron Eisenberg, of course, everybody who played Nog.
Yes. Who Aaron looked up to Avery as a mentor, much in the same way as Nog looked up to Sisko as a mentor. And one of Aaron's favorite moments to work with Mr. Brooks was in season 3, Heart of Stone, when he tells Sisko that he wants to join Starfleet. And the moment Sisko grabs Nog and says, "Why do you want to join Starfleet?" Trying to get to the meat of what drives Nog, and that's a special moment. It was an extremely powerful moment for Aaron. So that also is a powerful moment for me.
There it is.
Yeah.
So good.
So good.
And you said Aaron was not prepared for it, in that he wasn't told that was going to happen.
Right, because they hadn't rehearsed it that way. So when the cameras started rolling and Sisko grabs Nog, he's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And it took his breath away for a second, but he loved it because, he's like, that's what acting is. You're in the moment, that you're living in this moment truthfully, and it worked in that particular scene when they had done it that particular time. So yeah.
Melissa, when you first told Siroc and me about that, something I just realized was we never asked, or at least I don't remember if we did Aaron ever get a chance to tell Avery that?
I don't think he did. Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, I don't think he did. Yeah.
It's too bad.
I don't think he spoke of that. So, but yeah, Aaron, Avery meant a lot to Aaron as, like I said, a mentor and a teacher, an acting teacher. He got a lot from Avery's generosity of sharing the screen, is sharing the stage with people. So.
Thanks, Melissa. Well, Mr. J.R. Poole, we know you are a huge Mr. Brooks fan. You're a huge Deep Space Nine fan, a great artist. You do a ton of great art with Deep Space Nine themes. Do you have a favorite Sisko moment?
There are a lot. As far as representation goes, it was, I remember Iris said this about having a black television show, and Deep Space Nine wasn't mentioned. I think it was on TV Guide or something like that. I watched Deep Space Nine religiously. That was a part of my experience growing up, is to see this man and his son on TV, at prime time. So when you have the other shows that were kind of like comedy shows, even though it's a sci-fi, it was more serious to me. This is the way my moment is, as I wrote it down, how Sisko and Jake's relationship was. I always wanted to have that kind of relationship with my dad. And I'm watching it on TV, kind of living it through these two people. Whenever he would just put his arm around his son or kiss his son on the cheek, I'm like, man, my mom and dad were divorced. And so when I come over there, it's like, you're kind of talking to a stranger. And I remember the first time my dad put his arm around me and gave me a kiss on the cheek, I was in my teenage, I was like maybe 16. And I thought, oh, this is my Captain Sisko moment. I was so happy that it happened.
I love that.
And I'm like, oh, do it again. But we don't live in the same place, so I had to leave. And that was always what I remember, is the on-screen presence between father and son, and being a leader. And when Melissa's talking about how Sisko treated Nog, just to be a leader, and you see that your friend's son has joined the service, is listening to Avery's voice, how he talks to Nog. This is someone he cares about, and he's under his command. When he lost his leg, he looked upset about that.
Yeah.
And there's so many moments with the brilliance of the acting, what he's putting into the character, where it really humanizes this man. So you tend to like him. I mean, I've rewatched Deep Space Nine so many times. You just like him even more. This is not just some sci-fi character, like a real person who lives in the future. And that representation is great for me, because I feel like I have a place in the future. Like when I was telling somebody, I told this to Nichelle Nichols when I met her at some Comic-Con, that when I was dispatching, sometimes I would say hailing frequencies open, and then you start thinking about certain Star Trek episodes to calm your nerves, because it was a very stressful job. So you're thinking about Sisko, and I'm sending these people on away missions. That was my fantasy away mission thing. To break that story, like how Sisko treated Dax, this person coming in and he calls her old man.
Mm-hmm.
Just in his voice. It was just like you're talking to your friend that you've known for a long time, though in a different body. And I thought that was great to have as a role model too. How you treat others. And there's just so many. I can go on. I'm gonna stop it there.
That was great stuff though. Thank you, JR.
Thank you.
Marjorie, how are you?
Yes, I'm doing well.
Do you have a favorite Benjamin Lafayette Sisko moment?
Oh yes, like so many others. There are so many. I came off of, we were talking about earlier, Hawk. I came off of Spencer for Hire, and I was like, oh, okay, this is a different role for Avery Brooks, and it was cool. I'm totally with you. I actually have it written down, full range of emotion for a person of color on TV, because back then it was like, you had the funny Hispanics, you had the funny Black comedians, you had the funny, the one-liners, and everybody had their place, everybody had their emotion. But here is someone who is showing a full range, and it's like, oh my god, a human being on TV, that's amazing, right? I have two examples, and it actually was placed in several different episodes, so I can't name just the one, but the premise was there. And I said, the way he looks the other way when someone is technically wrong, but he doesn't disagree with them. Pretty sure he did that for Odo. Pretty sure he did that for Kira. Pretty sure he did that for Dax and so many others. And then he did that for himself. Right? Is that in the Pale Moonlight, where he does the drink at the end? He actually did it for himself. So it was like, okay, here's a person who knows the difference between right and wrong, but he has to balance that with, but what has to be done? And that's based on what he thinks should be. And the other one was his ability for forgiveness when he loves someone. And my favorite was the way he embraced Cassidy when she came back from prison. That was like, she was so worried. She was, even after they kissed, she was like, what? Like, everything's okay? He's like, yeah, let's go back to my place. It's kind of like, so that was really cool for me, because relationships are not perfect. People are going to do stuff that you really don't like. You might turn around and hate them back, but he chose love, and that to me was incredible.
Mm-hmm. Quick shot of Spencer for Hire here.
Cool.
Pretty cool.
Was the best.
Well, thank you, Marjorie. Great stuff. Eve England is out in Wales. She's a huge Deep Space Nine fan. She's not sure about the others. She's like, Enterprise, cool. Deep Space Nine all the way. The others, get in line. Do you have a favorite Sisko moment?
Well, it's funny that you actually said that, because what's been really interesting is I feel like I'm appreciating more about Sisko now that I'm watching the other Trek shows, is just how authentic and complex he is as a character compared to the others, from day one. He doesn't come with this hubris, this sort of sense of entitlement, that the other characters, especially Picard, has.
Easy.
And ultimately, he's this flawed character, as Marjorie was just saying, and that's what really makes him, relatable, far more interesting from my perspective. And when I was sort of thinking about, what my favorite moment is, and I think it's really difficult because there are just so many, and I think it's just, how we see this sort of angry, really traumatized person right at the outset, and how we see him throughout the show developing, having to make impossible decisions, but he's always ultimately doing it for the betterment of others, and putting himself on the line and taking those difficult decisions, because he knows it's the right thing. And how he's, it makes him more human. It kind of gives, and he's always got that sort of sense of love and loyalty to all his friends and everything. So in going back then to the two scenes I picked, because it really struck home with me, having watched that recent Picard episode when we were talking about it in one of the episodes, when Captain Shaw had a go at Picard and had that kind of conflict. And I was like, yeah, that we started off Emissary with that scenario where we have this, guy who's on a pedestal, and Sisko is just like, I'm not taking any of that bullshit. You basically killed my wife and ruined my life. And I was just like, this is just that is what Sisko is. He isn't going to take that and just smile and nod at this just because Picard is this legend. And he does things his own way. I just think that was fantastic. And the fact that then you have a later episode with Q and he punches him and says, I am not Picard. I was like, yeah, you're not Picard, and that's why we love you. And I just think the way that then Avery performs that, he's this strong, amazing character, but he's always got that kind of sense of, you sense that underlying kind of vulnerability to him from that trauma that he's had, and the tragedy that he has throughout the whole season and how it ends, particularly. I just think that's, why Sisko is so special, but it's actually hit home even more for me now, having started to watch TNG and actually watching the recent Picard, because I think it's such a contrast. And, I previously thought I really liked Janeway. I kind of had a bit more of an affinity to her, but actually I think if I had to rate the captains now, I would by far put Captain Sisko at the top.
Nice. Luckily you don't have to rate them, but if you did, we now know. Well, Guldu Scott Jensen, he's the evil lurker.
Lurking around.
You have studied Deep Space Nine backwards and forwards. Do you have a favorite Sisko moment?
I have, like everyone else has said, multiple moments, and I'm hearing a lot of what I feel being said through like what Melissa said and JR and Eve. And I think my favorite moments from Sisko is how open he is and honest he is about growth intellectually and emotionally, and how open he is with his affection, not just to Jake, but eventually growing and being affectionate to Kira and to Dax, of course, and obviously to Cassidy. But I love how absolutely open and honest he is about pretty much everything, which is why In the Pale Moonlight strikes you so hard. But also, I feel like he was honestly doing what he had to do in that moment. So I can go on and on about it. But my favorite moments for him are where he exhibits that. Particularly, I don't know what the name of the episode is, but it's after they retake the station, after he and Jake had been separated for so long. And you could tell him he's just scanning the crowd, looking for Jake as soon as he comes off of that, out of that hallway. And he's just so, it wasn't in Sacrifice, I believe it was Sacrifice Angels then. Why? But he's got that moment where he's going, and he connects with him, and nothing else is there but him and his kid, and he's going straight to his son at that moment. And he's quasi worshipped by all these people of this planet, and none of that matters. And he's the commanding officer of that station, and none of that matters. And he's going directly to his son, who's been worried about immensely in the middle of this gigantic horrible war. And my other moment that I would say that particularly hits, which is strange because a lot of us talk about Jake teaching Nog how to read, and that moment there, how it's so powerful between Jake and Nog. But I think the moment is so powerful where you can see Ben's face learning from his son, and where he sees this compassion and this honest, youthful compassion that Jake has for Nog, and how he learns from it. And then he does pay that back later on in Heart of Stone with Nog as well. And being open and willing to grow in that particular moment. It shows up in Emissary with, you're right, I am in this moment. And he grows there all the way until the end of the series, which we talk about growth and character development in a lot of characters, particularly with Nog and with Kira. But I don't know if we focus on that enough with Sisko, and how he really does shift and change so much from day one till the very end.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Good stuff. Thanks, Scott. Speaking of shifting and changing, what's up, Chuck A? Really cool Ferengi shirt there. Do you have a favorite Sisko moment?
Well, there's it's in several episodes, but anytime he has had family time with Jake and his dad, whether they're in New Orleans, or the one time that the father went to the station for the first time. I really love those family moments. And you throw in when they had, when Ben married Cassidy, and you have the Jake moments in there. So all the family moments were really nice. And then conversely, I loved all the time that they had with Goldacott and Garrick. He had a lot of adversarial moments with both of them. But I think with Garrick in particular, with the Pale Moonlight, that was a fantastic scenes with Garrick and Cisco. But Goldacott, it started out, Goldacott was sort of friendly with Ben, and then of course they quickly became adversaries as the seasons went along. But there was a lot of great scenes between Avery and Mark Alimo and also Andy Robinson in there. Enjoyed all of that. Enjoyed the season 6 and 7 when he threw in the Dominion War, and he had more moments with Goldacott and Garrick as well. So loved all.
Thanks, Chuck. Great stuff. Estelle, so good to see you again. Do you have some favorites or a favorite Ben Sisko moment?
What I love about the character is how grounded he is in where even though he's on a space station, he seems like a real person, living his life, loving his son and his friends, and doing the best that he can in insane situations that nobody who's dealing with the death of a spouse should be dealing with, because he's dealing with grief on top of all the other responsibilities he has. And then once things get better, then they get worse and better and worse. And just that growth throughout the show, like was mentioned before. Unfortunately, everybody already picked my favorites, so can't go there. But that's about it. I actually knew who Avery was because my family watched Spencer for Hire, and I was too young to started. But I did see A Man Called Hawk because by then my bedtime was late enough that I could actually watch that show. So I thought it was really cool when he did get Deep Space Nine, because he was one of the few actors that was Black who wasn't there as a comedian or a musician. He was just an actor, and it didn't matter that it wasn't an issue who he was. It was just that he did.
Well, thank you, Estelle. Great stuff and good knowledge. Wow.
Yeah.
Speaking of good knowledge, we've got Wyeth here. He knows pretty much everything. Do you know, however, what your favorite Sisko moment is?
My favorite Sisko moment. I mean, a lot of the great ones have, of course, already been mentioned. I think for me, I'll stick thematic. I'll see if I can pick a moment out, but I actually also wanted to mention Sisko's relationship with his own father. That kind of, I mentioned in the chat, but I always love seeing Brock Peters in general. I loved watching him as an actor. And his performance as Joseph Sisko, you see where Ben got his love. You see where he got his enthusiasm, and I think that was one of those very subtle castings that just perfect. They didn't need to find anybody else. I think that for me, looking at the entire show as a whole, that focus on family, that focus on, maintaining those connections, in a healthy manner, and being communicative and being open with feelings and all of those things, I think that was one of the things that made DS9 itself so unique. Back in the 90s, there were shows that were cerebral and made you think, but there weren't a lot of shows that did that. And there definitely weren't a lot of shows like Star Trek. And in general, I think DS9 got a lot of flack for a long time for, oh, well, they're just on a space station. Well, that's where all the best stuff happens. It was about a community. It was about showing, how this one man comes in, doesn't want to be there, finds a reason to stay and a reason to have passion. And slowly over the course of 7 years, you see, and bring it back to Avery, you see that character shift. And it's beyond, in my opinion, it's beyond just what the basics of what an actor does. There's something about the way Avery acts. He has always, in my opinion, put so much more emotion into it than a lot of other performers. And I think it's part of it's a difficult thing to do. And I think the other thing is, from everything I've heard, it's part of just who he was. He was very real, I think I remember hearing he was reserved, but he was still, a very real person. And when it came to those scenes, I mean, every time I see Avery interacting with Siroc, to me, it's a father-son relationship. It was just the perfect example of that, and to see it grow over 7 years is just so awesome.
Mm-hmm.
So
thanks, Wyeth. That was great. Pat's already unmuting. He knows he's next. What's up, Pat? Do you have a favorite Cisco moment?
Yeah, that's actually tough though, because there's so many good ones. I wrote down a few. I'm kind of dialogue driven in how I remember things, and also I've watched Star Trek many, many times, so I end up memorizing it inadvertently. But I feel like the pilot episode covered so much ground too. I mean, you guys all know, but it was just such a great start to the show. Obviously the father-son relationship was huge right out of the gate. Sisko's a grieving father on top of that. And then the thing that I remembered most, I guess, from that episode was the confrontation with Picard, because me as a viewer, I'm a little kid watching TNG going, oh, Picard is everything, he's the man and all this stuff. No one ever really steps to him. And Sisko is basically like, hey, you killed my wife, man, and I'm still going to do my job to the best of my ability. And I don't care if I'm interrupting a superior officer to tell him that. Like, he's really giving it to Picard. So that was kind of a cool, shocking moment. And he played it really, really well. So it was kind of a cool start off where I was like, oh, okay, this is something different. In the same episode too, where he's introducing himself to Kira, and she's like, so you're just going to come in here and steal this office from me? And he's like, well, I thought I'd introduce myself and then take the office, but we can do it in whatever order you like.
That's great.
Yeah.
So good. But just, the way the line deliveries are just fantastic. And, but I mean, I'm hard pressed to find a bad moment with Sisko, honestly, just because, like Wyeth was saying, like, he just puts so much emotion into everything. He almost acts with his whole body too, even if it's not a physical scene per se. He's just like all in, which I really liked. But the two other moments or quotes that I wrote down when I was thinking was, maybe you guys can help me with the episode, but it's the one where they go undercover as Klingons to uncover the changeling plot against Gowron or with Gowron.
Oh yeah. When Colomini made the weirdest looking Klingon ever.
And he's super reserved and shy, and he's like, what was that?
So mad in that makeup chair.
Yeah. That was a good one. But Sisko hears this guy telling a story about, and I got the Starfleet captain a benzite and I ripped a breathing tube from his head and I killed him. And then, he ends up taking him out, but he's such a pro that he can't control his emotion. He wants to get the guy, but he still stays undercover and makes an excuse for why he's beating the crap out of the guy, which I thought was cool. Kind of speaks to his character. He won't blow the mission, but he can't let that go unpunished. But real quick, just the last one was definitely in The Visitor. I didn't have a specific allegory in my own life necessarily, but the scene in the line I think that really gets me is right near the end where he's talking to adult Jake in the white space, and he's basically saying, you're spending all this time trying to save me. You're older than I am now. Like, you just got to stop. Like, just live your life, man. Like, that will make me happier. Don't worry about me. And he says, you still have time to make a better life for yourself. Promise me you'll do that. And I get like teary eyed every time he says that, just because it's such great writing, great acting, great delivery, and such a encapsulation of the character. I feel like he cares more about his son than anything. So that was probably my top moment right there.
Well, thanks very much, Pat. That was awesome. Mr. Siroc Lofton, you most likely spent the most time with Avery than the rest of us. Probably spent more time with him. And you've probably got a million stories, but do you have any final thoughts or favorite moments you'd like to share out of the many?
I think you guys highlighted a lot of those favorite moments for me.
Mm-hmm.
I love so many things that he does, but what I really love is how he hits emotion. And Avery can really, send the emotion that you need expressed with his performance, and he delivers that in such a way. That's one of my favorite things that he does, and it's so subtle, but it's so forceful. I also like when he's serious with people and he draws a line.
Oh yeah.
Of what he'll tolerate and what he won't tolerate. I think that's one of my favorite things about his character. I've heard people say that people only treat you how you allow yourself to be treated. And, Cisco doesn't allow himself to be treated in a way that's disrespectful or where he feels like someone is being condescending. He really draws the line in that respect. That's one of the things that I love about it. The Visitor obviously jumps out at me as a favorite thing. Just doing The Visitor, there were so many moments there. Pat, I have to agree with you. I do get choked up as well when I see that last scene when he says, to go and live your life basically, and stop worrying about me, essentially let go of me to some degree. And the way that life imitates art is kind of crazy, and vice versa. So there's so many parallels in life that are similar to the experiences I've had with him on the show. That's one of the crazy things as well. But nothing's going to top the fact that he was a father figure to me. That's going to be the number one thing on my list at all times. The performances and the acting, and that's all secondary to the love that he showed me as a human being, that he, just shared with me. And so that's going to always be top on my list about it. He's always been a father figure, a role model, and he did it by example, not by preaching to me or telling me what to do. He did it by example, and that's how the best leaders lead. They roll their sleeves up, they get the work done, and then you follow because you see them dedicated. You see the kind of commitment that they have. And that's how he led on the show as well as an actor. He came there, got the work done every day. Didn't matter if it was a 20-hour day or 15 hours or if he had just got off of an airplane. He constantly led by his work ethic and his dedication to make sure that the job was done with quality. He never delivered a half-assed performance. He never came unprepared. It's always about being prepared and having an understanding of what he wanted to convey in the scenes. A higher level of understanding than I'll ever have. And that's one of the things I admire about the rewatch is I get to see how amazing he is from, a different perspective. And, this has been such a great journey. I've never met anybody like Avery Brooks. And I've met a lot of people, and I've had opportunity and pleasure to meet a lot of quote unquote famous people and celebrities. And I've gotten to have good conversations with them to get to know kind of their personality and what they would be like and kind of feel people out. And nobody's impressed me to the degree that Avery Brooks has impressed me about his knowledge of the world, about his knowledge of circumstances happening in this country, about the history that's happened to all peoples from all walks of life, particularly about the knowledge of his own ancestry, of African ancestry, world history, Shakespeare. I mean, there's nothing that he can't accomplish. There's nothing he can't talk about. My cousin is a solar scientist, and he has a PhD in photovoltaic science, and he's one of the top solar scientists in the world. And we ran into him. I ran into him at a convention I was doing in Denver. And I was at the Denver airport. It was my first time being there. I've never been there before. And I'm walking to this huge airport. If anybody knows Denver airport,
it's really
humongous.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm walking through that huge airport, first time in Colorado, first time in Denver. And I see my cousin. He's my Ethiopian cousin on my Ethiopian side of the family. His name is Dr. Andanet Alemu. And he might have been in the chat a few times actually while we talk and do these things. But and so I run into him and I'm like, what are you doing here? He's like, what are you doing here? He says, I'm here for a solar conference. And all of the top solar people are here for this conference from around the world. There's the Chinese are here, the Russians. It's a huge conference. What are you doing here? And I said, well, I'm here for a Star Trek convention, And so
similar.
It's similar. So we kind of, we link up. He decides to change his flight. He was headed out. He was catching a flight to leave. I was just arriving. And so we link up and he says, I'm going to change my flight. I'm going to stay here and go to the convention with you. And so he did. And as a result, he was hanging out with Avery and I, that weekend. And conversation came up between us. We were sitting there and having a conversation with the three of us. But, my cousin said something. And Avery's response was just amazing because he said, well, I'll tell you what. If you think you know so much, because my cousin, was going off this whole doctor, really intelligent kind of like, this stuff might be above even techno babble stuff. And so, so Avery says to him, he says, well, if you know so much, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he said, how about this? Why don't you speak for me at the convention? And I will go to your solar panel conference and I'll speak there for an hour. He said, do you think that you're able to do that and switch? And my cousin, who was being braggadocious about his knowledge, got super nervous. Like, I can't stand on front of stage and talk about Star Trek for an hour at a panel. And that's when I realized Avery could stand at a solar conference in front of the world's top scientists and speak for an hour and hold the crowd and entertain everybody and probably give us some insight to something that nobody else was thinking about. or a perspective in a way that, frame things in a perspective that will change the way you approach your own industry. And that's the level of, just genius that I believe really kind of exemplifies who Avery is as a person. He is just so knowledgeable about the world and about human behavior and about how we exist together on this planet, or sometimes don't coexist. And the way he frames it is exceptional. Those are the things that I love about him. He's so intellectual and so deep that it's a blessing to be able to listen to him and soak that knowledge up.
Wow. Well, thanks, Siroc. We knew you're going to deliver. You always deliver with great Cisco and great Avery Brooks stories, and you've always got new ones for us. We appreciate it. We're always going to try to soak up every single ounce of history we can get from you. Well, thanks, everybody. That's about it for us. So thank you to JR, Melissa, Eve England out in Wales, Gull Du Scott Jensen, Chuck A, Estelle, Wyeth, Marjorie, of course, who's now on her way to a concert, and Mr. Pat Brownfield as well. Thank you all for joining us, everybody. Real quick, I'll tell you, for me personally, because I think that's why Melissa raised her eyebrows when I said that's all the time we have. I mean, too many to name in particular, but when I first watched Star Trek as a kid, it was about learning about the new aliens and all the Dominion and all this and that. But once I learned about all that and I rewatched it, it's just the family stuff. I already know about the Vorta and the Cardassians. It's about Brock Peters. It's about, every word that he mentions. It's about every moment between Benjamin and Jake and how genuine it looks. My God, I mean, there are great actors in the world, but nobody can fake how genuine that was. Like it just transcends through the screen. And so every moment there, too many episodes and moments to name in particular. But for me, that's what makes Star Trek Deep Space Nine was the family moments of the Siskos. So that's it. Thank you all for joining us. Wish we had way more time to talk about this, because I bet you we could all talk for like 2 hours each about all of our favorite Cisco moments. But thank you very much. Everybody enjoy the Cisco Day, and we will see you soon.